Oh, before we get into this epic episode of Optimize Your Body podcast, the Optimize Your Body scholarship applications are now open. That means one lucky person is going to get 3 months of free coaching. So this is going to be kicking off this month, February, and that'll take you into the summer. So you're going to get into the shape of your life physically and mentally, and you're going to have one-to-one support from me. No messing around. Nutrition, training, lifestyle, mindset is all in. So don't miss this opportunity. All you got to do is apply. Now, I will be selecting the winner based on why it's important to them. What's their real reason to change? So take your time with the application form, and you'll find the form just beneath in the show notes. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Optimize Your Body podcast. I've got a guest on today. Haven't had a guest on for a few weeks, and we're not messing around today. We got my man Gerald Hamilton on, and mate, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me, man. This is awesome.
Great to have you on, man. Great to have you on. So I'd love to just get straight into telling the audience a bit more about yourself, my man. I'd love for you to share, because you just said off air, right? 13 years you've been in the fitness industry before. First of all, just to backtrack to your story and how you got into coaching and I guess where you're at now.
Yeah. So my journey is it's interesting. Any change in my career has always been like a total surprise and accident. Like I originally started off in college and I thought I was going to be a physical therapist. You know, it's funny. I think almost so many coaches, everyone started off as going to be a physical therapist, but then ended up starting down that direction, and I realized that was not what I wanted. For me, at least here in the States, it didn't make a lot of sense to go $200,000 in debt to make $100,000 a year. That math didn't math for me, and hoping the industry is the same after like 8 years or whatever to get a PhD. So didn't end up wanting to go that route. But thankfully, during that direction, I found personal training changed my life. I was like, oh my gosh, this is everything. Because I'd always had this like entrepreneurial side to me since I was a little kid. My dad was an entrepreneur. I was like 12 years old, shoveling driveways for 20 bucks in the winter, like that kind of vibe. And then I found that side of me found personal training. I'm like, oh, game over. And so that's when I started building my in-person training business locally. And it got to the point I was working for 3 different gyms while I was building my own independent training and whatnot. And then I ended up scaling that and ended up like, that was my full-time thing where I was training like 4:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night and like crazy hours. And I ran that for a long time. And then I wanted to change some stuff. It got to the point where I'm feeling burned out. I have no personal life and I'm capped at how much I can grow. So I decided I want to transition this thing online, but I had no idea how to do that. So I hired my first business mentor who showed me how to take what I was doing in person, transition it online. And that's when I started creating content. So that's why like on my Instagram, there's like 4,000 posts because I used to build my business completely from Instagram. So that's when I started posting content. But it's crazy how things change, because if you look at my content now versus when I started, it was like, there's the wrong way to deadlift. Here's the right way to deadlift. Here's how to overhead press the wrong way. Here's how to overhead press the right way. It was so surface level. It was mostly fitness workout stuff. Never taught a whole lot of nutrition, but as the game evolved and as I evolved in coaching and transformation and whatnot, everything evolved. So as I started to go through that, that's when the business started to grow. I started to get a following, started the podcast, all of that kind of thing. And then that's when I became kind of known coming up as like pretty well the sustainable weight loss guy. I was never like the bodybuilder or like the or like the physique athlete. I just wanted to teach normal people how to eat donuts, drink wine, and look good naked. Like nothing deep, just sustainable fat loss. And it was great. Helped a lot of people with that. But then I felt like something was missing, because mind you, during this time, I became obsessed with psychology, neuroscience, and how the brain works in personal development. So selfishly, I just studied this stuff myself. Like I have this little mini library behind me on the video, and I started reading and learning all this stuff selfishly just to make me better. I never intended for it to come into coaching. Well, then after years gone by, I'm still coaching people, and about, I don't know, 7-ish years, maybe 5 or 6 years in, I noticed a pattern, because my passion for teaching just like fat loss started to go down, and my passion for personal development and psychology went up. And I got to this crossroads, but then I noticed a pattern coming in where every person that would come my way, I would be ready to take them into like fat loss, for example, but then they would start sabotaging and have all these inner game things coming up. So Mrs. Jones comes in and I'm like, cool, let's do this weight loss thing. And then all of a sudden she'd be doing great. But then all of a sudden she would start emotionally eating because she didn't know how to separate her emotions from food. And I go, oh no, well, I can't get her the results I promised her because she has all this baggage. Okay. And I'm like, I'm going to take what I learned from psychology. I'm going to fix her emotional eating real quick. And then boom, fast track to fat loss. And I never talked about it, but I started like, not under the table, but I started like doing all this work with people that I had to do in the beginning before they could even coach with me into the fat loss program because of the inner game problems going on. But then like Mrs. Smith would come in or whoever in the same thing. She would be doing really well, but then all of a sudden identity, her old bad identity started making her self-sabotage and she had no idea. And I'm like, I got to fix her identity, change her state, rewrite who she thinks she is, neuro pathway work. And then, okay, cool. We're on the fast track to fat loss. This became every single person that came my way. And I realized, oh, this is mainstream. Everyone has inner game issues, relationship with food issues, emotional issues that's making weight loss impossible. And then I thought, what if I could bring these two worlds together? But no one's done that. No one's done that. And then I got all excited and I'm like, I could make this a thing. Then massive imposter syndrome set in after that. But I said, screw it. I'm going to do it anyway. This is what feels aligned for me. And that's when this concept of dieting from the inside out came from, because it came out in conversations of, I have to diet you from the inside out first before I diet you for real. Because we have to fix your relationship with food. We have to fix your identity. We have to fix your emotional regulation around food before we can make any surface level fat loss stuff work. So that's where it really started and got to where it's at now. And then now all I teach is dieting from the inside out. And when I get brought in to speak, podcasts, the coaching program, courses, the whole 9 yards, it's all about how the inner game is the gateway to getting everything that you want from a physical and fat loss perspective.
Yeah, love that, man. Love that. The inner game, right? Dieting from the inside out, because that's obviously shout your podcast out as well, right? And that's
Yeah,
been
that's
going strong.
podcast.
I just checked, man. That's a
Yeah.
solid like 7 years, no, 6, 7 years, right? You've been
Yeah. It started off as like a side hobby. Like I was just like, oh yeah, it's another thing. I like to talk, blah, blah, blah. But then now it's like full production, podcast episode a week, 350 something episodes later. Yeah, it's been a passion project for sure.
That's dope, man. Yeah, you got onto that. You actually smart just to be able to understand and have that awareness, right, with the psychology piece.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of known it for a while, and long story short, I used to struggle with binge. I'm not going to go into that story, but it was only afterwards that I started realizing, actually, it's more about what's going on internally, how your mental and emotional health kind of dictates your food choice in a sense, and then
Yeah.
environment on top of that, right? But yeah, you mentioned then about kind of teaching people that actually they can have flexibility, and they can eat some donuts here and there, providing they're making good decisions for the most part, right? It's kind of what you're alluding to. But let's go. Actually, I want to go just before we get to that, just more into your story, right? So
Yeah.
when you were younger, tell us a bit more about what kind of got you into being healthy yourself and your journey.
Yeah, so basically everything I teach, I struggled with. I had never been, we'll even say gifted, genetically gifted, or anything with any of this stuff. Like I grew up a fat kid. I grew up with family and friends were all trendy dieters, like Weight Watcher family members kind of vibes. And I struggled with it. Even as a young kid, I was the fat one in my little friend circle. I was the slowest one to run around the house. My brothers and friends were all athletic, and here's chunky husky jean wearing Jared. And I'm short. I'm like 5'6". Like I'm still even like people think I'm 6'3" online for some reason, but I'm like short
Yeah,
dude.
tell them, bro. You can still say you're 6'3", they'll never know.
There you go. But yeah, so like that's what I mean. I struggled. So I remember like even as a kid, like I was given a Weight Watchers book when I was like 11. Like as a kid trying to figure out like I don't want to take my shirt off, my jeans cut into me, and then my mom's just like, here's a Weight Watchers book. Here's what I do, and then I'm like 12 years old trying to count points and getting anxiety around food and being
Wow.
scared to eat certain foods. Like that's where it started for me, and but I really never had a great role model. I didn't know any of this stuff. So fast forward into my teenage years, I got involved in martial arts. That's where my fascination for how the body worked. I'm like, oh, if I turn my heel and pivot my hips, I can kick harder. That's where like kinesiology became like a really huge focus of mine, where I love the way the body worked and how muscles worked. So I got really sciencey into muscles and movement patterns and all of that for a while. But when I was like older teenage years, like, like 16, 17, 18, leading up into college, that's when I started to really get into this stuff more. because when I got into martial arts, that's when I started to get really athletic, and I started to, I mean, I was training what, 5-ish, 6 days a week of that stuff. And that's when I started my coaching career started, honestly, even before fitness. I got hired on at that original martial arts school to help teach and like running classes and do private lessons and teach kids how to break stuff and like the whole 9 yards. And so that's where I found my first passion for coaching is I loved teaching. I loved taking someone and mentoring them and all this stuff. And then that transcended to the gym. So then when I'm like 15, 16 years old, I started going to the gym. I started going to like the YMCA or like started going to my first meathead gym with like a bunch of bodybuilders and stuff like that. And I fell in love. I put on like a lot of muscle tissue and I started diving headfirst. That's where I first saw mentorship because then like this trainer at the gym kind of took me under his wing and was teaching me stuff like, oh, tuck your elbows on your bench presses, start doing this better, go deeper on your squats. And so I go, oh, this is interesting. But it's also where I got a lot of really bad information with dieting. This was a very stereotypical meathead gym. Like the guy that like the most jacked guy in the gym is just like, you got to eat a dozen eggs a day and avoid fruit by all costs. Like that kind of content from them. And so I started doing it. So I got results for a little bit, but then I kept sabotaging him because everything was a trendy diet. It was like cutting carbs and eating 8 times a day of chicken, rice, and broccoli, cheat day mentality. That's where I struggled a lot with that because I didn't know any better. But it wasn't until I started learning from people online and a few other people around how to do this sustainably. And then I got into college and started to get more educated. And I go, oh, this is a game changer. And that's where that started to shift for me. And then I became a personal trainer. And even as a trainer, I was giving like I see old Facebook posts from like 10, 12 years ago of me telling people bullshit as like like hey, don't have sugar because sugar spikes your insulin and insulin stores fat. And I'm like, even back then I'm like, what was I doing? But then I learned, I got more educated, and then I just evolved as a coach and myself and the whole 9 yards. And that's where that kind of started for me from like an earlier age. So
Yeah, got it, man. It's resonating so much because it's very similar to me. I started lifting when I was like 16, 17. And it's so lucky, right? When you look back, the fact that you start lifting when you got that sweet spot of testosterone, you're young,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So you're malleable and you get stuck in and it changes your life, right?
Hmm.
Even that environment can really change your life, especially starting lifting at a young age, especially for someone like yourself. I think that's a real big battle, right? I was lucky where I always played sports from a young age and stuff. But with yourself, it's a battle, like you say, slimming wall, right? From the age of 12 and being
Yeah.
conditioned that way, where it's all about losing weight, right? It's not
Yep.
necessarily health focused, right? It's about losing weight.
Right.
So then you're getting that kind of obsession. And I guess even more, maybe even insecurity at that age as well, right? Which is a
Yeah.
real challenge. And I think, a lot of kids are struggling in this day and age as well, right? With where we're at with technology and, ultra processed foods and stuff like that. So yeah,
Mhm.
interesting. So fast forward then. So you got then into obviously personal training people and stuff and the
Yep.
psychology piece, right? I really want to go deeper into this. So, was there any particular moment, or was there like a lowest point for you just in your journey of like losing weight and
Mhm.
getting into training, health and fitness? Was there a low point for you, a lowest point where you just like, man, my mental health, my physical health is dog shit right now. I need to do something about
Yeah, so for me, a lot changed when I started going to therapy. So I originally started going to therapy years ago, and that's where a lot of my own internal stuff came out. Because one of the things that I used to do is I would still struggle with emotional eating, and most of my binge eating came from cheat day mentality. I thought it's like, oh, I can literally starve myself during the week, excuse me, and then I can just cheat day on the weekend, and
it. Dude, we
somehow
need
it's
to
all
talk
fine
on
and
this
dandy.
just real quick, right? 'Cause I talk about this all the time. So continue on that topic of cheat days and what it does to you psychologically. Then we can go
Oh,
into
dude.
more pain.
Well, and then it wrecked my relationship with food. I would have all the guilt and shame around uh around cookies, donuts, cake, ice cream, breadsticks, whatever. But like, dude, it got to the point where I would spend more time strategically in like strategy for my cheat day than I would my wife's birthday. Like every week I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna get them. Gonna go get donuts at this spot, breadsticks at this spot, lunch at this
Dude,
spot. And
make
I would,
lists. I shared my
yeah,
list with clients the other day. I shared the list I used to make in my notes, dude.
yeah.
100%.
It's it's because I would eat chicken, rice, and broccoli out of Tupperware 6 times a day, all day, every day. And then I would binge like crazy on the weekends. And I thought I was convinced that's what you did. It's what I was taught. It's what I was taught at like the gym back in the day and all the stuff. But all the guys telling me the stuff were on steroids, geared out of their gourd, and like they were in it and they were genetic monsters and it worked for them. So I'm like, why isn't it working for me? But then over time, I started to get educated by other people I followed on social media around how your relationship with food is important, how restriction is what causes the binge, and how you should not have a plan that's so unsustainable and things like that. So that's where it really started to shift for me. But then a lot of the other internal stuff really started to change when I started getting more into my own. I like to say the darker parts. So a lot of the other thing that I did was I didn't just struggle with emotional eating, but I struggled with emotional, what I would call emotional productivity, where I didn't know how to handle these darker parts, my own unworthiness, these old stories of not good enough, my own very anxious person. I didn't know how to handle that. So I found if I go work really hard and build a business, I feel better, which is dangerous because I had a great result helping people all over the world, making money, doing the whole nine yards on the foundation of a horrible inner game. And so that's where I started to learn about, oh, I can't do that. So there's some mentors that I started learning from, some books I started reading, realized I got to start healing these darker parts of me. But so much changed when I went to therapy because I started going to therapy. Like, here's what's wild. Back then, I was the stereotype where I thought therapy was only for suicidal quacks. I didn't think there's ever a reason to go to therapy unless you were like schizophrenic or something like why like a much more serious mental disorder. And my wife at the time was in therapy and she was having all these breakthroughs and I go, okay. And here's my thought. My what changed it for me is I went, okay. Because by mind you, this version of Jared from back then was still super happy, hyper positive. Things were great, but I went, okay. I see people in weight loss think what they're doing is great, and they end up wrecking everything, their metabolism, their relationship with food, the whole nine yards. I go, I know the more successful I become, the crazier my stress levels are going to get. I think I'm handling everything okay. But what if I'm not? What if I'm the mental health equivalent of a trendy dieter mom? So I go, you know what? I'm gonna just go to Shelby, my wife. I'm gonna go to her therapist because she probably knows all about me from their conversations. I said, I'll just go do a mental health checkup. And everything was great about 90%. I was not handling stress and yucky emotions very well. I was hiding anxiety, hiding stress, and running from these darker parts. And I had no idea. I was oblivious to it. But instead of like, yeah, there'd be times I would turn to food, but I was mostly turning to ambition, goals, and like other means to suppress and hide what I was feeling. So that's when I went to that, changed everything for me, got deeper into psychology, started studying other psychologists and dove hard into that world. And it changed the game for me. And that's when I started understanding emotional regulation, neural pathways, like the science of habit building, darker parts work, like inner family systems and the whole nine yards. And that was a major contributor to where I got to. So
That's interesting, man. And was there a point for you though where you hit like if you don't mind if I ask, you hit like a
sure.
low point when you were like what I call an effort moment, right? Where you just go, something's got to give, or was it just a gradual thing where you were like, okay, this is making sense and educating yourself?
To me, it was more gradual because it was like, man, because I would do what all my clients do is they would do well, make some progress, regress, do well, regress. I never got to like that, 350 pounds. Like, well, how did I get here? I never got quite there, but it was like, why is this not working for me? And a lot of it started to change. Like I said, when I started reading these books, learning all this stuff, I go, oh, that makes so much sense. And then I started changing those things. So it was more for me gradual versus like, oh, I weigh 500 pounds. I got to change something. So
Yeah, got it, man. Yeah, that makes sense. So you said then about it's interesting what you said then. What do you call it? Emotional, what was it, productivity? What did you call it?
I call it, yeah, emotional productivity, where I would feel icky emotions, fear, worry, doubt, anxiety, not good enough. And I would go distract by building a business or go working or go using the gym as therapy or whatever. So instead of feeling and healing through these darker parts, I would go use it as fuel to go do something over here. But it's a more productive means to emotional eating is what it was.
It's
So
a really good point, man, because we do that and we can justify because we are medicating essentially through exercise. Yeah,
yeah,
okay, it's likely a better choice than doing other stuff. But unless you get to the deep root, the root cause, right? Because I had some therapy as well, and it's like it's painful, right? When you go and talk about these things, it's painful, it wears you down, it's emotional, you know what I mean? So it's easier just to go to the gym, I could just pump some iron, I'm good,
yeah,
I'm healthy, I'm in shape, my blood
yeah,
markers are good. So you can kind of
yeah.
like yourself. That's a really good point. But yeah, so just in terms of emotional eating, right? And binge, and I've struggled with it, you've struggled with it in the past, and you talk a lot about this. Where is it you feel people are going wrong, right? Because they feel they can just lose weight and then boom, this year, for example, right? I'm going to lose some weight. I'm going to drop that 20 pounds and the rest is history, right? But there's a lot more
Mhm.
to it than that, right?
Yeah. So when it comes to binge eating, I the way that I teach, I think there's four major contributors to binge eating because, and then a lot of people are what I call a combo platter, where they have two or three of these issues, or hell, even all four. Whereas I think a big part is the first thing is kind of separate from that is I think one of the biggest reasons people struggle in general is they live in the land of instant gratification and they do things that are unsustainable. Right. If like I had someone I was chatting with literally today who has been finally consistent for 7 whole days. And she says, I'm ready to turn it up. I'm ready to go into overdrive. I'm ready to get my results now. And I go, it's been 7 days. Like you haven't been consistent for the last 2 months. And then we're finally consistent for a week and we're ready to like turn it up. Like, no, 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 we can't do that yet. So I think there's too much instant gratification. Or I was having a conversation with someone, they said, man, Jared, I feel like it's going to take me 10 months to lose 30 pounds. I go, maybe even more. Like a pound a week is a pretty solid metric for this, but because most people are programmed, they should lose 30 pounds in 30 days, or they live by diet culture and they think they should, have their 2-year transformation in 2 months. So I think a lot of it is people's expectations are wrong and they live in the land of instant gratification. I think that is the underlying piece to a lot of it. Because if people could slow down and only do things that are sustainable, most of the issues go away. But with binge eating specifically, I think that I'll just rattle them off real quick. The four reasons for me are: number one is based in hunger, as in people eat too little. They're cutting their calories too much. They pride themselves on being hungry. They're skipping meals, slashing calories, and they think the more hungry they are is the better. And so they live in the land of I'm just seeing how many calories they can get away with, like how much they can starve, versus thinking how much can I get away with eating while still losing. The second reason I see is it's based in restriction, whereas it's no wonder they restrict the food, or they binge on the foods they restrict. So they go, oh, I can't start. Once I start, I can't stop. I can't have one Oreo without eating the whole sleeve of Oreos. So then they live in the land of binge restrict, binge restrict, binge restrict. The third reason is emotionally. It's emotional eating, or they don't know how to handle their negative emotions separately from food. So they turn to food. But if the world we live in is kind of crazy, and if you have a lot of stress and anxiety and fear and sadness or what have you in your life, and every time you feel dark emotions, you turn to food, well, it's going to be impossible to lose weight because you'll do good for 3 days, be sad, binge eat, and gain it all back, and lather, rinse, repeat. And then the fourth reason is I call it's identity based. It's too often if someone has struggled with something for a really long time, they take that identity on. This is when they don't say I binge, they say I'm a binger, right? It's a noun now. It's not just something they do, it's who they are. Or they've spent their whole life on a diet, so I'm a dieter. Well, too often people don't understand that the relationship between the subconscious mind and the identity is like a mother bear, as in your subconscious mind guards your identity in that fashion. So if someone has the identity of, oh, I'm a binger, but then they go 3 weeks without binge eating, they have to subconsciously sabotage it and they go back to binging again because it's who they are, right? It's like if someone is like, oh, I'm a procrastinator, I always put things off till last minute. Well, then they go 2 weeks of being disciplined, they'll find themselves procrastinating subconsciously again, and it'll slowly start to drift back in. So for me, those are the four main reasons someone binge eats.
Love that. You just reminded me of what I read in a book recently, and it said about your subconscious mind just takes your word for it, right? Which
Yeah.
is powerful, right? Because you find yourself saying stuff, and even myself, right? Saying stuff or whatever, even thinking stuff, it's catching yourself, right? Because you're telling yourself these stories, you're identifying, for example, as a binger, but are you really a binger? Or have you just told yourself that
Mm,
story? It's
yeah.
interesting, right? And that's
Yeah.
so powerful, man.
Well, because the thing is with subconscious beliefs are really deep rooted. Your subconscious mind is your emotional mind. And a lot of these beliefs just get impressed upon over time. Usually to change a subconscious belief, it's an overtime thing, right? Very rarely, unless you have a huge emotional impact moment, does your subconscious mind get changed that quick. It's a overtime thing. Um, so if you have a deep rooted belief of I'm not good enough, I'm a binger, this is just who I am, whatever, then it's no wonder you subconsciously find yourself drifting that way. Because here's the reality: 80 to 90% of human actions, our actions on the day to day, are subconscious. We don't realize we're doing them. Well, it's an autopilot, but we have to ask ourselves, what is my autopilot programmed to? It's my subconscious beliefs. It's the story. I'm not good enough. I'm a binger. I've never been successful. I knew I was going to fail. Oh, I've never been able to do this. Oh, I'm just the kind of person that XYZ. I always tell my clients, I say, if your identity is made up of a limitation, something's wrong, because you will default to that limitation subconsciously. You won't even be aware it's happening.
Yes, it's such powerful stuff, man. Even just making people aware of that. So breaking down, because emotional eating, right, Jared, and binge eating, whenever I do a poll or even with clients, and they all kind of tie in together. Because I know you've talked about all or nothing mentality and
Yeah.
perfectionism. That's a big struggle, especially for a lot of my clients are kind of type A types, I guess, like us, right? So it's that
Yeah.
perfectionism trait kind of comes with that, and they can be self-sabotage kind of mechanisms, right? So with emotional eating, that being, you mentioned about emotional eating being one of the issues with binging, right? Let's
Yeah.
go a little bit deeper into that. If someone's listening now and they're like, right, okay, I struggle with that. Like, how do I fix this? I know it depends on the person, but what's the
Mhm.
fundamentals, would you say?
So, well, we have to establish what emotional eating is doing, because the solution to fixing emotional eating is doing the one thing emotional eating is stopping you from doing, which is feeling. Because emotional eating is this. If I had to, if you said, Jared, what's the Jared definition of emotional eating? I would say hiding, suppressing, distracting, or escaping what you feel with food. I feel sadness. I don't want to feel sad. So I distract, escape, or hide that with eating the activity, right? Because there's so many things, because a lot of people may have learned emotional eating when they were a kid. They didn't know how to handle mom and dad's divorce, so they started to feel better with food because they grounded them, and then they just never stopped that habit, and now they're 35. Or they learned it in college, whatever the case is. But emotional eating is hiding what you feel with food, simply put. So the solution is we have to start regulating those emotions without using food, because I don't believe using food is regulating. It's not, it's hiding, right? If I said, like I've seen other people, for example, instead of emotional eating, they feel sad, they clean their bathroom 12 times. They literally will go like power clean their bathroom to distract. Or let's say a wife and husband have a fight, so they pour into the kids and they ignore their issues and they just like pour into the kids, whatever it is. Or when someone says, I have to get wine to take the edge off. Well, take the edge off of what? Oh, the anxiety, the stress, the overwhelm, the lonely. It's because you're basically telling these deeper parts of you, this your inner child, you're not allowed to feel XYZ. So the solution is I always paint the picture like this. What would you have a child do? If you had a kid that the dog died, unfortunately, let's say the dog got hit by a car or got put down, and the child is sad, upset, angry, confused, all the emotions. I go, what would you do? I don't know a single parent that would say stuff ice cream down their face hole and tell them to get over it. They would hold the child, cry with the child, hug the child, let them feel whatever's coming up. I go, great. So why don't you do that to you when you feel these things? Imagine your kid's dog dying and they're sad and upset, and you say, mommy's only here for the good feelings. Here's ice cream to distract yourself. I don't know a single parent who would do that, but that's what you're doing when you're emotional eating. You are telling this pattern of yours, these emotions, or your inner child, you are not allowed to feel sad in my body. Here's ice cream to distract. That's literally the message you're giving this, versus all emotions are meant to be felt. This is why the corny saying is feeling is healing. It's the only way to do this. I compare it to going to the bathroom. Imagine needing to go to the restroom and you go, ooh, I don't like the way this feels. And then you go distract by eating. It's going to come out one way or the other, right? That's just going to get really messy really quick. But you need to be, in the same way we want to be digestively regular, you need to be emotionally regular. If you feel sadness, it's in your body. There's a great book called The Body Keeps Score, because the body does. It's why we
Awesome
can
book.
label it. We can say, oh, there's a lump in my throat. It's a pit in my stomach. It's a weight on my back. We can describe the way these things feel in our body. Well, I always say it's like, well, what are you going to do with it? If you feel stress, it's like a ball you're holding. Well, what are you going to do with it? You got to do something with it. You can either hold space and breathe and heal through it, and it lets the air out of it, and you can put that ball in your pocket, or you can go, I don't know what to do with this, and you pop the ball, and that's a problematic, or you put it under your shirt, whatever. But you have to do something with it, because otherwise your body's just going to store it somewhere, right? And this is when like people can even get like back pain, and then it surfaces somewhere else and all these other issues go on. But if your only modality to handle your emotions is by eating, good luck losing fat. It's like if my goal was to save money, but I was an emotional spender, I would undo that progress effortlessly because of all the big emotions we adults feel.
So interesting though, right? Because everything you're saying here, some people are not, they haven't got to the point where they're even aware of that, right? Even if you say to them,
Mm-hmm.
I said to a client recently, what's the trigger then that's causing this in the evening?
Yes.
Because she would had dinner and then she would put the kids to bed and then the binge would happen, right?
Mm.
We found some solutions, but then the bottom line is, I don't know what you mean. What trigger? I was like, oh, what kind of emotions are you feeling? She's like, oh, it's just just like a sweet tooth after eating. And then you go
Mm,
deeper and deeper, and a lot of it is escapism, right? Most of the time. So it's just being aware of that. And it's not about being perfect either, right, Jab? But
right.
when you've got that awareness, and I think there's so much power as well in just breathing. I try and get clients to do this. It's actually really hard to do, even doing it myself when I'm rummaging around the house, well, not rummaging, but looking for food after I've eaten, knowing I'm
Hmm.
not hungry deep down, just stopping and taking 5 deep breaths, for example. Like you say, just feeling what emotion am I feeling right now, right? But even doing that, man, because food, it governs us so much. It's hard to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's sneaky. Like, and the thing that I always like to tell people is if your body, or I'm sorry, if you are feeling the urge to eat when you're not hungry, your body is trying to tell you something. If you feel the urge to eat when you're not hungry, because not all urges to eat are hunger, right? Hunger is actual hunger, but if you're like, why am I wanting food, but I'm not really hungry? It's just a sweet tooth. It's just this. It's just that. Because I don't believe in restricting either. Like anything is okay in moderation, the way that I believe. But at the end of the day, if you are eating to seek comfort, for a dopamine hit, for to escape something, got a problem there, because now you are setting up a pattern every single time you do it. This is why we have to learn to regulate our emotions first. The other kind of a saying that I use is there's power in pausing, right? If you're like running straight to food because you feel negative or you feel stress, pause, take some deep breaths, go journal some emotions, go hold space for that, be a space of love for what's coming up for you, even the anxiety or whatever. And then you'll find if you just allow that to be there and pause for like 20 minutes, the desire to eat will go away. And it was never hunger. It was you're wanting to turn to food because you're sad or whatever the emotion is. Oh, hang on. I think I lost you. Can
Oh,
you hear
sorry,
me?
dude. My bad. I
Oh,
put
there
my
we go. There we
my
go.
mic on mute.
No, you're good. You're good.
I was going to say, so with the emotional eating as well, with certain foods, obviously ultra processed foods and food quality as well. Now you always have to get to the root cause of why you're doing it. But do you ever find that it's the quality of food, right? Ultra processed foods, and sometimes getting people to swap and make better decisions that ultimately they can swap that behavior. You always have to understand why you're doing it, right? You have to understand
Mhm.
why it's making you fall down, what emotions are triggering you to eat, environment. But do you find on a strategic level that can be helpful as well, just getting people to switch the quality of foods, or do you feel you always have to go super deep on the psychology?
If it's emotional eating, I believe you have to go deep to the emotions, because even emotional eating, I've seen. I mean, it's easier to go turn to highly processed foods, but if it's an emotional thing, like just even if like from a strategic standpoint, if someone's like, oh, I want to emotionally eat, and I go, well, just go have a chicken sandwich, or just go have a salad, or go have whatever better quality food. It's still, I don't want that person binging on high quality food, because even if it's better, like, yeah, let's not binge on ice cream, let's go binge on a salad. Binging still binging, right? Like, yes, it's a better choice, but I have a problem that like we're suppressing our emotions with food in general, right? It'd be like, it's like when the person says, oh, I have to go run. Like I work with some people right now who they're sad, they go, I got to go on a run, it's the only way I feel better. I go, don't get me wrong, exercise is therapeutic and it has that role, but if you cannot regulate your stress without running, then we're using that great tool incorrectly, right? Because I think whenever we get into because I still think the majority of what food someone eats should be better quality, more nutritious whole foods. But I also find though, just changing the foods itself doesn't stop the emotional eating, because we can't work through it without feeling. At the end of the day, everyone wants to do anything but feel the feelings. A lot of people want to intellectualize it. Everyone wants to think through it. But the only way to process sadness is to hold space for sadness. The only way to process and work through anxiety is to feel the anxiety. It's almost like if I said, if I need to go to the bathroom, how do I get rid of the feeling of needing to go to the bathroom without going to the bathroom? You can't. You have to go. You have to get what's in, needs to come out, because it's like a flowing system. And we're supposed to experience and feel these emotions. And it's the only way to get through them. It's kind of like the fear of heights. If you're scared of heights, the only way to get through it is get on the tall thing. There's no way to get over the fear of heights without jumping out of the plane or getting on the roof or whatever. That's why if we just make some swaps, yeah, it might temporarily help some things. They might get full. They might help with the other reasons that they may be binge eating. But with emotional eating specifically, we have to heal through the emotions and feel them.
Yeah, 100%. You've got to feel the emotions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's painful, right? Sitting there with your feelings sucks, right? At times, but it's
Yeah.
coping what you're alluding to earlier is like coping mechanisms as well, right? We touched on therapy as well. I feel like most
Hmm.
people pretty much everyone probably could just benefit from therapy, right? Because it's not even like you say, you don't have to wait till you're broken to do that.
Sure.
It's more a case of you're going to have that self-awareness in terms of why you act
Hmm.
certain ways, or, it could be food related, it could be your relationship, whatever, right? Why am I behaving this way? And it's deep rooted emotions a lot of the times, right? And sometimes trauma, like we say, Body Holds the Score is a great book on that. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's so many tools. I think a lot of people, I think everyone needs to go to therapy personally, but I think a lot of people aren't receptive to it yet. And
Yeah.
and so much of these inner working tools are only as good as your receptivity to use them. So if someone's not ready for therapy, no big deal. But what are we ready for? Can we sit? Can we meditate? Can we do breath work? Can we journal our emotions? Can we go on quiet, undistracted walks? Like, what can we do that starts this chain of events? Because at the end of the day, we have to start regulating these emotions, in processing them, in being okay sitting with them. But the crazy thing is, man, is everyone will do anything but sit with their shit. Like, everyone wants to do anything. They'll scroll on TikTok for 2 hours. They will binge Netflix. They will power clean their house. They'll go to the gym 2 or 3 times a day. Whereas so much magic happens, and it's like the body, right? Even forget emotions. The body heals itself, right? If you have the flu, you let it run its course, and your body gets rid of the flu, right? You have if all of a sudden you get a cut on your arm, the body the white blood cell count goes up and the body heals itself. It's the same thing with so much of this stuff. The body naturally purges these things, including the emotional side. It's why if you sit with your emotions long enough, you'll start to cry. And it's because it's your body purging these parts of you. This is even they've even done science experiments where when someone is having like a breakthrough or a therapeutic cry, they've taken those tears, throw them under a microscope. It's not just tears; it's tears and stress hormones.
I
Your
heard that.
body is literally purging these parts of you. It's why it's the only way they have to leave. Or someone may have a great breakthrough and they need to go to the bathroom real bad because the body was like clenching and holding on to everything.
Got to
It's
release.
right. It's why a lot of times if somebody has been holding on to these things and never let this stuff go, and they suppress, they have back pain. As soon as they get a good cry out, their back pain goes away. It's because the body is a wild thing. Think about how quickly someone can turn gray haired when they're stressed. If you look at the before and after picture of every president
Yeah,
going
it's
into
insane.
office and coming out of office, yeah, dude, stress will put you in a grave way faster than anything else because it does damage to the body. So if you don't have a modality to process and heal through these things, it's just going to wear and tear on you more and more. And if your only way to do it is through to get your little quick fixes, eat. Good luck losing weight and keeping it off. It's not going to happen because you're going to have a bad day. And you're going to binge again and undo everything.
Mm. Yeah, I love that, man. Love that. So just to touch on the other ones, right, quickly, is you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
restriction. We touched on our battles with that, right? With the cheat days and making
Oh my
lists. And
gosh.
I was doing the same thing. I would make it to like a Friday night, right, yeah? And I would get to
Yeah.
a Friday night burger and chips. And then it would be next day, okay, now I got to punish myself in the gym. And then it would be, okay, I'll have one healthy meal in the daytime, and then boom, binge Saturday night. And then Sunday, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good again in the daytime. Boom, might as well write the weekend off now. And it was like that for 2 years for me. So that was a mentality thing of restricting. I can't have these.
Right.
If you think, if I tell you not to think of a green elephant right now, you're going to think green elephant, right? It's the same sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's we have these inner rebel patterns that if you go, you can't have that, that's bad, that's all you want. It's like if you tell a toddler, don't touch the outlet, they're like trying to stick their tongue in the outlet. They're like, it's crazy. But it's the other part of it is it over time will wear your relationship with food. At the end of the day, and if your relationship with food is bad, this is when it exacerbates. You have food noise that's super loud. You can't quit thinking about food. You're obsessive. You're compulsive. You feel guilt. You binge eat. You emotion like it's you can't quit thinking about it. Once you start, you can't stop. That's what it all comes out of a poor relationship with food. So having a great relationship with food where you have mastery over these things is one of the most tactical things you can do from a fat loss perspective, the way that I view it. Because instead of trying to fight this uphill battle and getting all the foods out of the house and only, having all this stress is like, well, what if we just fix your relationship with food where you can have one Oreo and be good? Where you can eat mostly whole foods, but then go on date night and not wave that all or nothing flag and say, fuck it, I'm going to binge till Monday. What if we have a great relationship with food for where you don't feel restricted, where everything is all systems go, but we have an order of operations we can go by it, where there's moderation and things like that. But the problem is most people live in the land of all or nothing, or once I start, I can't stop, so I avoid it. That's like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. It's not going to fix anything.
Mm. So powerful, man. Because as you're saying this, I'm thinking how we justify as well little tiny escapism. For example, I struggle to just lie down. No, I should lie down for 10, 15 minutes. I want to do my little recharge when I get a chance. Boom, lie down and just silence and just breathe. But I'll justify like a podcast, for example. Yeah, but it's, you know what I mean? Like even that, I mean, you could take it really far as well and take this too far,
Yeah.
but just being there in silence with your own thoughts, man, that's a hard thing to do. But you always feel much better for afterwards. You take some breath, you get some silence, your mind clears the noise, you know?
hmm Yeah, I mean, most people don't realize it. If you think about it through the lens of like a child, I always compare everything back to children because it's so true and it usually resonates. What does a child do when they haven't seen mom or dad all day? And as soon as they see them, they're just like, mom, 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 dad, 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 dad. Then like they're wanting to show you how this stick looked like this stick, and oh my gosh, I missed you so much. And da, 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 da. What happens if you keep avoiding that kid? They get louder. And then they might start messing with, they might start breaking some shit because they're trying to get mom and dad's attention. But what does that kid need? They just need to be heard. They just need to go, tell me about your stick, buddy. And they're like, Dad, this stick was like this stick, and oh my gosh, I had such a good day. Da, 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 da. Give that little fucker 10 minutes, let him get it out, and then he doesn't care about you anymore. He wants to go play with the bugs in the backyard. It's the same thing with all parts of ourselves. We just need to be with ourselves. Most people's terror they have in weight loss or issues they have can be all contributed back to they have a poor relationship with themselves. They won't be with themselves. But if you can't sit with yourself, how can you overcome yourself? Like ask people that all the time. They're like, yeah, I know I get in my own way. I can't quit sabotaging. I know I'm the problem. Cool. How often do you sit with yourself in silence? Well, I don't. Why not? Oh, my brain won't shut up. Well, I can't. I go, what if you imagine that? Like, oh yeah, I don't spend time with my son because he won't shut up when I'm around him. So I avoid him more. And then he gets louder every time I see him. Like, yeah, no shit. It's because you're not spending time with him. It's like, what if you never went to the bathroom? It's going to be a really big session. It's no different with being with you. Of course, if you avoid yourself, when you're with yourself, it's loud. Well, maybe you should just sit in the loud. Like, what do you let a child having a tantrum do? You let them have their tantrum. Let them get it out of their system. You don't stop it. Yeah, you pull them out of the restaurant and like so they don't make a scene, but it's like, cool, have your hissy fit. And then all of a sudden, the kid usually doesn't want to have a hissy fit anymore. It's the same thing with us. I challenge everyone to, for the next like 30, 60, 90 days, 5 minutes with yourself. And then when that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, 10. When that's not that big of a deal, 15. The longest I have ever meditated myself in silence is I would stop about an hour, but I would sit in silence for an entire hour, and it is rough, even for me. And I'm like, I'm a pretty self-aware inner game person, but even me, about 30 minutes in, I'm getting antsy. I'm like, yeah, I want to get up. That's a pattern. That's some thoughts. That's some, I need to go do this. I need to go work. I need laundry. Da, da, da. No, I need to sit here and sit in the uncomfortableness. And then usually there's a breakthrough on the other side of that. But it's like a dog. If you're trying to teach a dog to sit, and every time it wants to move to get up, you let it, it'll never sit. Most people need to tame their own selves. But as soon as we feel uncomfortable, we go, oh yeah, let's just go. Now, one of the most powerful things you can do is sit with yourself in quiet.
Yeah, man. And I always make excuses for this myself. It is the most important thing, right? Just being present.
It's
I've had
hard.
this message many a times, right? When I've spent enough time journaling and everything else, I know what it is. It's being more present. And even by doing that, right, you're conditioning your brain then to be more present in the moment, right? Because you're just there with just your thoughts. It calms down your thoughts and it makes you more clear-minded and everything else, all the other benefits that comes with that. But just being able to do that. And what I do is I wait until something's broke, right? Now I do the minimum. So what I do is I do the bare minimum, right? Yeah. But then I wait till something's broke and then it's like an hour. Right now I need an hour in nature. It's like, well, no, you need to be doing the small reps, right?
Yeah.
Just like anything, like in the gym, right?
Yeah, or like
Every
brushing
single
your
day.
teeth or anything like that. Well, but where people go wrong is they go, well, Jared, I tried meditating or I tried sitting in silence, but my brain won't shut up. I go, well, you have to earn the right for it to be a Zen experience.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
again, like if you've been avoiding yourself for so long, it's going to be loud for a while. But most people have the expectation of it's supposed to be quiet upstairs, and it's not. I always tell people when they're like, well, my brain wouldn't shut up. I go, so we are aware of our thoughts now. That means you're doing it right. You keep doing it and it will get quieter and quieter and quieter. Then it'll get to the point where you go, I haven't meditated lately. I need to go do that. And that's a magic sweet spot.
100%, 100%. I've got that with journaling. I haven't.
Mhm.
It's interesting though, because it's not like it's the same as you, right? It's not like for me, it's that painful. It's not like, I'm running away from all this trauma and I can't sit there. It's too much. It's just like yourself, right? Got to get up and do this. Got to do that. Yeah, but what about
It's a
that thing? You didn't
pattern.
make a note of that. You didn't make a note of it,
Yeah.
but you're gonna forget it now. But I got to get up and no. I got to just
Mm.
okay. I put the stopwatch. Was the stopwatch on properly? Just making excuses, right? Just
Yeah. It's just a pattern, right? Like
yeah.
most people overjudge it. No, it's just a pattern. If I've spent my entire life crossing my right arm over my left, and now I'm going to go left over right, well, then it's gonna feel weird. And if I started the podcast conversation with the wrong arm on top, I would subconsciously uncross it, right? It's the same thing here. Is it's okay for it to feel weird. It means you're doing it right. It means you are unlearning things. Your brain is like, whoa, this isn't quite right, and it's changing it. So
Awesome, man. Just quickly on the hunger one, right? So true hunger versus, emotional hunger. How would you kind of distinguish that to the audience?
So I have a little checklist I like to use, or a little train of thought, because again, not all, this is why I actually don't like with my people using the word hunger, because a lot of people think all hunger is equal. It's almost like the way I compare it is like in the English language, we have with the word love you use for everything. Like I love lasagna, but I also love my wife. But my love for my wife is very different than the love I have for lasagna, right? So, excuse me. So this is why other languages have many different words for the type of love. Well, hunger is kind of the same thing, where if someone says, "Oh, I'm hungry," meaning they're actually hunger, stomach's growling, it's time to eat. But they'll also say, "I'm hungry," and they're just bored, or "I'm hungry," even though they're not and they're feeling emotional. So I always like to say, not all desires to eat are hunger. A lot of it is, it could be actual hunger, it could be boredom, it could be emotionally hiding, it could be all these different things. So here's my way to actually distinguish it. And this food may be different for everyone, but for me, it's a turkey sandwich. I go, would I eat it? If I'm like, I think I'm hungry, would I eat a turkey sandwich? And I go, no. Well, what are you hungry for? I'm hungry for chips. I'm hungry for ice cream. I'm hungry for candy. These like not like ultra processed, highly palatable food. A craving is one thing. Could I have a Oreo and be good? Yes. Okay, then have the Oreo. But if I'm like, no, I'm hungry for like a sleeve of Oreos. I'm hungry to go ham on a bag of chips. That's not hunger. That's emotional. That's a bad relationship with food. So my thing is, whether it be, would you eat an apple? Would you eat a turkey sandwich? Would you have like, what would be a really good, for the people listening, what would be a really nutritious, healthy meal that would satisfy you? For me, I'm simple. I would eat a plate of chicken, veggies, and rice, a turkey sandwich. So would you eat that? If not, you're probably not hungry. When we're actually hungry, it's wild what we'll eat. I remember being at a restaurant and they were taking forever to get us our food, and we ate the appetizer, but the appetizer was on like a bed of lettuce. I was so hungry, I was picking at the little lettuce strips because I was so hungry, legitimately hungry. I hadn't eaten all day. So when you're not sure of like, well, am I hungry? Is it emotional? Is it a craving? Would you go have a turkey sandwich? Would you go have a nutritious chicken salad or whatever? And if the answer is no, you're probably not hungry. It's probably one of the other things. Like I'll catch myself, I'll go open my refrigerator, and I'll go, and I have two or three meat options, like all these different meals. And I go, I don't want that. And then I'll go to the pantry and I'm like, nope. If I'm hungry, I'll eat out of the fridge, not the pantry, right? If I have a craving, that's different. And I'll have a moderate serving of like an Oreo or whatever. But if I'm like, oh, I'm really hungry, I don't want real food, then I'm probably not hungry.
Yeah, that's such a powerful thing, actually, right? That's very simple but effective. You open the fridge, you see the meals in there you've already got as well. You got some food prepared, or just chuck some meat on the pan. It's simple. I
Yeah.
don't fancy that. And you find yourself looking in the pantry. Okay, well, that's not true hunger then, right? It's an emotional
Right.
thing. Love that.
hmm
Simple.
Or if you go, no, I'm craving an Oreo. Cool. Then well, let's label it correctly. I'm not hungry, but I'm craving something sweet. Cool. Could you have one? Could you have one Oreo? Could you have like the 300 calorie Snickers bar? Cool. Have it. But if you're like, oh no, I want to eat like all of the Snickers bars. I want to eat a whole sleeve of Oreos. That's something different. Now we got some other stuff going on. So that's kind of like my little checklist in my head.
Yeah, I love that, man. And then finally, identity, right? I know you talked on a recent post. If you want to lose weight, for example, this year, you want to lose 20 pounds, what person do you need to become to lose that weight? Is the question you
Yeah.
need to ask yourself, right?
Yeah. You are receiving currently the results that are in alignment with who you think you are, or a specific version of yourself. So if let's say you are 50 pounds overweight, it's because you have been operating in congruence as someone who is 50 pounds overweight. So you probably view yourself that way. I'm telling you, it's crazy the amount of people who are on a weight loss journey. And it's like then they lose weight, but they still have the identity of a fat person. Or they're like, and then it's no wonder they find themselves doing habits in congruence with an overweight person. This is why the question isn't how do I lose weight? It's who do I have to become who loses the weight? Because you've been the person, if you have results you are not happy about, It's because you have been operating as this version of you. So if you want different results, you have to become a different person. One of my favorite neuroscientists to study, his name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. Dr. Joe says to have a new personal reality, you need to have a new personality. You have to become a different person. So I give this analogy. Imagine there's a high school kid who wants to go to college for football. He's like, "Oh, I want the scholarship. I want to go to but I want to go to school, go to college for football and get the big scholarship." But only good students get those. If you have A pluses and all that. And then he tells his mom, "Mom, how do I get the scholarship?" And she goes, "Well, you're a bad student." Like sits in the back of class, Fs, doesn't turn in his homework. Well, bad students don't get good grades and go to scholarships. He has to become a good student because then good students get good grades to get the scholarship. So the question wouldn't be for this kid is how does he stay a shitty student that gets good grades? It's no, you have to become a good student and do what good students do. Good students sit in the front of the class, they turn in their homework, they ask questions, they're attentive. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're not where you want to be, I would say, who do you have to become who gets these results? You have to become someone consistent. You have to become someone who slows down. You have to become someone who handles their inner game. You have to become someone who separates their emotions from food because and then you have to operate as that person. So how does the version of you of the after picture, how do they operate? How do they think? How do they walk? How do they talk? What do they do? And you just start being that person. And then you start to get their results because the actions are changed. But if you actually become that person, those habits are now ingrained and it's just who you are. And that's why it's not a question of how do I get, it's who do I have to become who gets.
Of that, man. And also it's the perfectionism thing as well, right? People think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be perfect. But like the likes of me and you, right? Well, I'm still emotionally, that's kind of normal here and there, but at least you're aware, right? Okay, I'm having this food. I'm not hungry, but I'm aware, right? And I'm not going to go
Mm-hmm.
overboard because I've become that person who eats good, goes to the gym and all
Right.
the rest of it, right?
Well, even someone who goes, well, I'm a perfectionist. Well, hang on. That's what would that version be? That being a perfectionist is an identity. That's the old use identity. What's new? I always use this term higher self. What's your higher self do? Because at all times there's three versions of you. There's the lower self, the sabotager, the identity, the perfectionist, the all or nothing, the once I start I can't stop. But then there's the higher self, the version of you that the highest version of you. Then there's you in the middle trying to decide who's going to win the conversation. But when someone goes, "Well, Jared, I'm just a perfectionist," I go, "Well, don't you think that's the problem then? Because you're trying to take old you, the perfectionist, and get new results." That's like the shitty student who goes, "I just don't turn in homework." Well, that's the problem. You're not doing the things good students do. If you want to have results that you never had before that can keep them, you have to literally undo all parts of you. Well, I'm just the kind of person that I only show up when I'm motivated. That's the problem. You have to become someone who shows up when they're not motivated. Well, I'm just not the kind of person to meditate and sit in silence. Okay. Well, that's the problem, though. You have to become someone who can regulate themselves separately from food. This is where the resistance kicks in, is because you've been doing something your whole life one way. It's like crossing your arms right over left. Now we're crossing left over right. It's going to feel weird. But that's the magic breakthrough. The resistance is required, is the way Stephen Pressfield always says. And that's the direction we need to go.
Yeah, awesome stuff, man. Yeah, so much gold in there. Really appreciate your time, man. And love that
Oh,
as well.
man.
It's just having that, being able to separate yourself from that as well, right? The higher self, the lower self, having that awareness to go, right, I'm in the middle. Because you're constantly kind of bargaining with your future self, aren't you, as well, right? With decision making.
Sure.
Like, okay, my current self, the lower self, he's going to go all in. He's going to sabotage on that potentially. But the higher
Mhm.
self, I mean, and then it's just finding that bit in between where it's like, okay, I'm going to let my hair down. I'm not going to be perfect. I might every now and then, like we were just saying then, right? I get that with my content. Okay, I'm trying to perfect it, but I'm aware of it. I'm not a perfectionist.
Mm.
I'm just every now and then that perfectionism thing pops up, right? Because you're trying to make things
Right.
perfect. But perfection doesn't
Mhm.
exist, doesn't it?
Right, 100%. It's always the other piece that comes into that is most people confuse what they do with who they are. As in, if they have perfectionist tendencies or a pattern, they go, "I am a perfectionist." Well, no, it's just something that you learned. If someone goes, I'm a binger," no, no, no. You learned a pattern of binge eating when you were little, but that doesn't mean it's who you are. I mean, I can go stand in my garage and make car noises, but that doesn't make me a car. But imagine if I made car noises and I was fully convinced, "Oh, I must be a car," right? That's silly. But how many times do we take a pattern that we struggle with and we take it on as our identity? right? Is like oh yeah, I've spent my whole life emotional eating. I must be an emotional eater. No, no, no. You have a pattern of emotional eating. That's it. Because if your identity is made up of things that aren't great, you will unconsciously fight to keep them. You have to separate. That's not who you are anymore. I have clients say that a lot is they'll be working with something and they go, I'm just a da, da, da. Go, no, no, no. That's not who you are anymore. It's like if someone, let's say not even weight loss related, let's say smoke cigarettes. If they're trying to quit, which is going to be successful? The person that goes, oh yeah, I'm a smoker trying to stop, that's keeping the identity. Or if they go, this is the last cigarette, and then someone goes, you want one? They go, I'm not a smoker anymore. They're separating it from their identity with the correct action. But too many people are keeping the identity and trying to change some habits, and it's short-lived. You have to change the actual beliefs about yourself of that's not who I am anymore. You have no responsibility to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. If you want to change and reinvent I think everyone should reinvent themselves every day. Every day, wake up and get clear who you are and who you're not. I'm not a binger anymore. I'm not an all or nothing person anymore. I'm not a perfectionist anymore. Well, then who am I? Well, I'm someone who does this. I'm someone who does this. If you can't get clear on that, at least get clear on who you're not. It makes decision making a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that, man. Love that. And it's a
Yeah.
story you tell yourself as well, right? You just gotta, because when you do the reps every day and you keep deciding consciously in the morning, for example, I don't want to be that person. Naturally, you're
Yeah.
going to grow out of that person, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, love it, man. Hey, where can the audience find you, Ja? Anyway, online.
Yeah. So if you're into this kind of content, my podcast is called Dieting from the Inside Out. It's on all platforms and YouTube. And then if you like this kind of content, but in your actual like feed of like Instagram and stuff, I'm at Real Jared Hamilton on all other platforms like Instagram and TikTok. So
Awesome, man. Great content as well. Go check that out. And ladies
appreciate
and
it.
gents, if you liked the episode as well, please give us a rating and or review on iTunes and Spotify, and or just like and comment on YouTube. Cheers, brother. Thanks for your time, man.
Awesome. Appreciate it, brother.